Hello, you're listening to Storytelling Saga, the podcast that shares stories. I'm your host, Allie, and this week I'm discussing a short story called Nirvana, written by Adam Johnson. And Adam Johnson is a Pulitzer Prize-winning author. He won the 2013 Pulitzer Prize for fiction for his novel The Orphan Master's Son. And he also won the Sunday Times Short Story Prize for this particular story, Nirvana, which is part of a collection of short stories he wrote called Fortune Smiles, which he also won an award for. And I actually read this story in a different book of short stories called The Story Prize, 15 Years of Great Short Fiction, edited by Larry Dark. And it's a collection of 15 short stories written by all different authors, all of whom have won this story prize. So that's really cool. And this story in particular is just one of those stories that really stuck with me to the point where even days after I read it, I still found myself thinking about it. It's so poignant and it's so heartbreaking yet hopeful, and it's just really interesting because it's set in the future and technology plays a big role in this short story. And something else about it is that the narrator, since this story is told in first person point of view, we never actually learn his name in the short story, but he lives with his wife Charlotte in Palo Alto. And sadly, Charlotte suffers from a rare disorder called Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a disease in which the immune system attacks the nerves. So it leaves Charlotte paralyzed. And at the start of this story, it's been 9 months since her diagnosis, and she's been paralyzed, and they don't know if it's temporary or permanent. But her pessimism towards her disease and just her outlook is in stark contrast with the narrator's optimism, and yet his struggle with wanting to help his wife in any way he can and be supportive of her, even though he himself is trying to be optimistic and upbeat for her, but he himself obviously is struggling. And at the start of the short story, the narrator says, "It's late and I can't sleep. I raise a window for some spring Palo Alto air, but it doesn't help. In bed, eyes open, I hear whispers, which makes me think of the president, because we often talk in whispers. I know the whispering sound is really just my wife, Charlotte, who listens to Nirvana on her headphones all night and tends to sleep mumble the lyrics. Charlotte has her own bed, a mechanical one." So, that opening paragraph sets up two big coping mechanisms we learn for each of these characters, for the narrator and for Charlotte. For Charlotte, she actually has two coping mechanisms, one of which is marijuana, even though in the story she says how she doesn't like getting stoned, but she says that it quiets the inside of her. And then her main coping mechanism, though, is that she listens to Nirvana, which, of course, as we know, tragically, the lead singer Kurt Cobain committed suicide in 1994 at the age of 27. But she uses just listening to Nirvana on her headphones as a means of escape. And similarly, with the narrator, he has his own version of a coping mechanism with something that he invented, because in this universe, in this short story, the President of the United States has been assassinated. So for me, reading this, what comes to mind is the assassination of John F. Kennedy in 1963. So I think of it as that type of character, the president, in the universe of this story. But in this story, the president had recently been assassinated, and the entire nation is just in shock and in mourning and grieving. So the narrator comes up with this algorithm and basically brings the president back to life through a hologram. And the algorithm scrubs the web for speeches of the president and interviews. So basically it's just all of the data combined and all of the archived footage of the president. And what's also key about the start of this short story is the fact that neither of them can sleep. So then when Charlotte wakes up and she says how she hears a sound, and the narrator says, "At the window, I peer out into the darkness. It's a normal Palo Alto night. The hiss of sprinklers, blue recycling bins, a raccoon digging in the community garden. Then I notice it, right before my eyes, a small black drone hovering. Its tiny servos swivel to regard me. Real quick, I snatch the drone out of the air and pull it inside. I close the window and curtains, then study the thing. Its shell is made of black foil stretched over tiny struts, like the bones of a bat's wing. Behind a propeller of clear cellophane, a tiny infrared engine throbs with warmth. So, this drone becomes essentially a key character in this short story because it starts off as this kind of threat in a way. This weird, ominous, creepy thing to the narrator because he doesn't know where this drone is coming from. He doesn't know if it is from a rivaling company or who sent it, if it's autonomous. So then he just takes it and basically adopts it and reprograms it so then he can control it. So this drone becomes symbolic first of like an unknown and then of hope, as we'll see later on in the story. But then we get the backstory about the president and how Charlotte doesn't like the narrator talking to the president, that she doesn't get why he needs to talk to the president, how she says that he should just accept that the president is gone and move on. So then later on, the narrator goes to talk to the president, and every time he does, he like just asks it because it's a hologram, but asks the president questions, trying to form some type of connection with this hologram, saying, oh, do you understand that you're gone? Do you understand that I created you? And the president just answers in kind of generic things based on past speeches, etc. The narrator says, when I reach to turn off the eye projector, the president looks me squarely in the eye. A coincidence of perspective, I guess. We regard each other, his eyes deep and melancholy, and my finger hesitates at the switch. Seek your inner resolve, he tells me. And then we learn more about when Charlotte was first diagnosed with this terrible disease. And the narrator and Charlotte have this really dark conversation in which she had made the narrator promise her that he would help her commit suicide because she's so desperate for an escape, that if she asked him that he would help her, even though she says, it's okay, I would never do that to you, that she would never actually leave him, but she just likes to know that she has an out. And then meanwhile, we learn about the narrator's job, that he works at a company called Reputation Curator. And he says, basically the company threatens Yelpers and Facebookers to retract negative comments about dodgy lawyers and incompetent dentists. The work is labor-intensive, so I was hired to write a program that would sweep the web to construct client profiles. Creating the president was only a step away. And as he's driving to work, he sees other people using the president. He sees people talking to the president, the hologram, and the president standing next to someone, just keeping them company. And that it's extremely successful that 14 million people have downloaded the president because they are all unable to come to grips with the fact that the president was taken so suddenly. And then when the narrator comes home, his boss Sanjay is there waiting for him, but Sanjay goes by the name SJ. And he basically wants to team up with the narrator because he absolutely loves the success of the hologram. And he says, your program is like Google, Wikipedia, and Facebook all in one. Everyone on the planet with a reputation would pay to have you animate them, to make them articulate, vigilant, eternal. And then, meanwhile, the whole thing with the drone comes back into play. The narrator reboots it, and SJ gives him a pair of glasses that allow him to control the drone. So then, this drone now becomes, as I said, a symbol for hope. The narrator later, he goes to his wife, Charlotte, puts the glasses on her, and at first she's confused, but then she realizes she can go out into the world and see things that she hasn't been able to do for so long. The narrator says, I put the glasses on her, and it takes her eyes a minute of flashing around before the drone lifts from my hands. A grand smile crosses her face as she puts it through its paces, hovering, rotating, swiveling the camera's servos. And then the drone is off. I watch it cross the lawn, veer around the compost piles, and head for the community garden. It floats down the rows, and though I don't have the view Charlotte does in her glasses, I can see the drone inspecting the blossoms of summer squash, the fat bottoms of Roma tomatoes. It rises along the bean trellises and tracks watermelons by their umbilical stems. When she makes it to her plot, she gasps. "My roses," she says, "they're still there. Someone's been taking care of them." "I wouldn't let your roses die," I tell her. And then she says, "I never thought I'd smell my roses again," she says, her face flushed with hope and amazement. The tears begin streaming. I remove her glasses and we leave the drone hovering there. Then she says how she wants to have a baby, that maybe this could be a chance for them because she says how it's already been 9 months, I could have been doing something this whole time, that maybe this can give her a new purpose since she feels so hopeless and feels she has nothing else. And then he talks to the president again. And he's seeking answers because he wishes he can help his wife more, and that's why this, with the president hologram, it's a means of control in a way, something that he himself has created all by himself, that he is seeking answers, and he asks the president, "When it's all finally over, where is it that we go?" "I'm no preacher," the president says, "but I believe we go where we are called." "Where were you called to? What is it that you are?" "Don't we all try to locate ourselves among the pillars of uncommon knowledge?" "You don't know where you are, do you?" I ask the president. "I'm sure my opponent would like you to believe that." "It's okay," I say more to myself. "I didn't expect you to know." And before that, he talks about children, how his wife had said, "With the baby, I'd have something to show for all this. I'd have a reason. At the least, I'd have something to leave behind." So then later, when he joins her in bed and they try to make love, he thinks to himself, "I try to focus on the notion that if this works, Charlotte will be safe. That for 9 months she'd let no harm come to her. And maybe she's right. Maybe the baby will stimulate something and recovery will begin." And then he also thinks back on the promise she made him keep. And she had said, "Promise me that when I tell you to make it stop, you'll make it stop." "Make what stop?" I asked. She retched, long and cord rattling. I knew what she meant. "It won't come to that," I said. She tried to say something but retched again. "I promise," I said. And then in the present she says, "It's hard for you to understand, I know, but the idea that there's a way out, it's what allows me to keep going. I'd never take it. You believe me, don't you? I hate that promise. I hate that you made me make it. I'd never do it, and I'd never make you help." "Then release me," I tell her. "I'm sorry," she says. And then he realizes when he looks down that she's crying and she says, "No, I'm okay. Just keep going and do something for me, would you? Put the headphones on me." And then he's just demanding to know, what is it with Kurt Cobain? Why do you always need to listen to this music? And later he's in the garage and the drone has followed him again. And he's always trying to make sense of the drone. He doesn't know where it came from. He doesn't know what to do with it. So then he says, "The drone, having found no escape, comes to me and hovers silently. I must look pretty pathetic because the drone takes my temperature. I lift the remote for the garage door opener. 'Is that what you want?' I ask. 'If I let you go, are you going to come back?' The drone silently hums, impassive atop its column of warm air. I press the button. The drone waits until the garage door is all the way up. Then it snaps a photograph of me and zooms off into the Palo Alto night. And then as he looks outside, he spots their cat, which he had to get rid of because it was in the way after Charlotte had returned home after her diagnosis. And the cat is symbolic of their past life together. And he says, "This feeling of being in proximity to something that's lost to you, it seems like my whole life right now. It's a feeling Charlotte would understand if she just talked to the president. But he's not the one she needs to talk to, I suddenly understand." 2 things, that he released that drone, like letting go, and seeing their past life, how he wishes he can go back to it, how he wishes he can help Charlotte understand not all hope is lost. So then when he comes back with his eye projector and he sets it up and he says, Kurt Cobain appears before her, clad in a bathrobe and composed of soft blue light. And she's amazed and she tries to talk to him, and the narrator says, "While the president couldn't quite find your eyes, Kurt is purposely avoiding them." So then the narrator leaves to let her just have her moment with this Kurt Cobain hologram and let her have her own catharsis. And he overhears her talking to Kurt Cobain, and she says, Don't do what you're thinking about doing, she pleads with him. You don't know how special you are. You don't know how much you matter to me, she says carefully, like she's talking to a child. Please don't take yourself from me. You can't do that to me. She leans toward Kurt Cobain like she wants to throw her arms around him and hold him, like she's forgotten that her arms don't work and there's no him to embrace. So that last sentence, that's the end of the story, and that just really lingered in my mind. First off, that imagery and just literally trying to reach out for hope, but nothing's there. So what a powerful ending. What an incredible story. And everything she says to that Kurt Cobain hologram in that moment is really just everything the narrator wants to say to her, that he didn't understand why she always had to listen to Kurt Cobain. And he had listened to the Nirvana album in his garage trying to make sense of it, but he doesn't understand how she finds relief in it, just as she didn't understand the purpose of the coping mechanism with talking to the president. Also the fact that it's the band Nirvana, and Nirvana, the word itself, means happiness, paradise, enlightenment. So all of that and just embodying all of that hope. Just truly profound and really an amazing short story, absolutely deserving of the award that it won. And I highly recommend reading it yourself because just the impact of it, it's truly meaningful and powerful. You can find it online if you search Nirvana, Adam Johnson's short story, it'll come up. And here we are now, entertain us. And with that, that is going to conclude this week's episode of Storytelling Saga. You can follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at Storytelling Saga, as well as on Twitter at Storytell Saga. You can also send me any questions, comments, or writing prompts by leaving me a message in the contact section of storytellingsaga.com or by sending me an email at storytellingsaga@gmail.com. Next week, I'll be eating cookies and avoiding confrontation when I discuss New Girl. Until then, thank you for listening, and remember, write what you love.